Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Franchise Tag. I'm Gareth Smith, and today I'm joined by Johnny Bigsby. And today we're going to talk about the end of season. The regular season is in the books. How are you feeling, Johnny, after the final week of the season being over?
I can't believe that we are sitting here saying that the NFL season for 2024-25 is in the books. Yeah, it's the regular season, obviously, at least. It's absolutely flown by. I mean, there's been excitement, there's been disappointments. Well, from a personal point of view, it's been a difficult year as a Jets fan, but what a season once again. It's good to see a few new teams, I suppose, emerging as
Yeah.
contenders. I think that's always something that's really good. But another great year, and just can't wait to watch the playoffs. I think this is the most exciting part of the season. There should be some really good matchups in the next couple of weeks.
And obviously, you did bring up the Jets there, who I don't think have had the season. I don't think anyone at the beginning of the season may have thought, because there's people talking about them potentially being the team that makes the playoffs this year. What has gone so horribly wrong there this season, and what needs to change?
I think it's a definite culture thing from the top down to begin with. Obviously, the play on the field was nowhere near where we expected it to be. Whether that's the regression of Aaron Rodgers, the defense as well was a major talking point. Obviously, a few injuries, particularly on the defensive line, which played a bit of an issue, but nowhere near the level that we expect of a Jets defense, particularly over the last couple of years. And I just think the Jets, year in, year out, expect way too much from their teams. Well, when you have a Hall of Fame quarterback playing, it doesn't matter what age he is, you expect to be a bit more competitive. The thing is, if we saved our best game of the season until last. I thought we were awesome against the Dolphins. Obviously, they were trying to get into the playoffs. Themselves haven't had a great season. They're not a great team in my eyes, but the Jets were able to pretty dominate the Dolphins on Sunday. And I think this is just me being, optimistic a bit too much about the present. I'm not sure what the Jets should do next season, whether that, keep Aaron Rodgers around or not. I would absolutely love, I would have loved for it to happen, but I think it's all screaming towards a complete rebuild, obviously with the head coach and GM position vacant. I think that everything needs to be teared down in New York, which means another couple of years of struggle before doing exactly the same thing yet again. So not a great time to be a Jets fan.
But so GM wise. Obviously, GM-wise is obviously going to be an interesting choice what you bring in. I assume you just want one that doesn't rely on his son telling him Madden ratings for player recruitment. Is that a minimum ask, I assume?
That'd be ideal, to be honest. I mean, the whole workings of the Jets in that Athletic article were just absolutely ridiculous. Madden ratings, and then based on what his son thinks, and it's a bit of a joke, to be honest. And for a team with, I suppose, the fan base and the media sort of attention as the Jets, they really need to get it right.
And obviously, to be fair, that game versus the Dolphins, you did actually have something in your favour that game as well. Friend of the show, Andy Davis, was there, and he's got a track record. I've never seen the Dolphins win as a Dolphins fan, and he has maintained that. So fair play to him. He always picks a game, and somehow they always lose. But poor Andy, anyway. But yeah, we talk about your head coach. You've had some fairly well-known names being thrown into the mix at the moment, with Vrabel already being interviewed, Rex Ryan potentially wanting to come back, with the likes of Ron Rivera, Arthur Smith, Matt Nagy. So some names that are well-known to people already being mentioned. Out of the candidates you've seen so far, is there anyone you would gravitate towards being the guy to build and return the Jets to being a decent team?
I think the idea of going for someone in a similar mold to Robert Saleh probably appeals to me the most. I think obviously Saleh's downfall was what we assume his relationship with Rodgers, and obviously Rodgers being the alpha in that sort of locker room. But if you take Rodgers out of the equation, I think building a good defense has been the Jets' philosophy, I think, in recent years, and that's worked to an extent. And I quite like the idea of restarting that again. So for me, the names that have been thrown out, obviously Aaron Glenn's having a brilliant year as the Lions defensive coordinator. He looks, a real leader and has obviously got a lot of attention. So, it's going to be a difficult one for the Jets to bring home. I know he's interviewing for the Saints, and among other teams as well. Another name that was thrown out, I think, was Vance Joseph at the Broncos. Again, someone who's had a brilliant year. Obviously developed one of the best defenses in the league. We know how good the Broncos are. Again, looks like a guy who can control things. So he's a guy who I think will be flying under the radar, but certainly someone who I'd like to have around. Obviously, the unrealistic, I think, options of Mike Vrabel. I think, and probably even Rex Ryan. I'm not sure I'd want to go back to Rex. I think that's moving in the complete opposite direction. Mike Vrabel, if it sounded like the interview went really well from both sides over the weekend, but I think he screams New England Patriots, and that's just a big smear in the Jets. So I'd love Aaron Glenn. I think he would be great. I'm not sure bringing in someone like Ben Johnson, and I'm sure he'll go on to have a fantastic career as head coach. I'm just not sure New York is the place for him to shine.
Another interesting candidate that I saw named was Brian Flores as well, who's obviously had an amazing season this year.
Again, a brilliant guy, and he obviously knows the division from his time with the Dolphins. There's a lot of noise, I suppose, around Flores. His time in with the Dolphins is obviously the sort of personality clashes that created quite a lot of headlines, I think, at the time. That's my only skepticism, I suppose, from Flores specifically, because we saw how good his Vikings team, watching the Vikings, in London against the Jets, their defense was phenomenal. And if we can replicate, something like that, the Jets, then I'm all for that. But yeah, Flores would be, again, I think, in the similar sort of mold to Joseph and Glenn. It's just I'm keen to see what those two individuals specifically can offer. Obviously, being first-time coaches, and I think people who can perhaps kickstart their head coaching careers with rebuilding a team like the Jets. I think that's somewhere I'm going anyway.
And obviously the Jets fired Salah not long after his trip to London. So we'll go to another team that played in London that has also fired their head coach in the New England Patriots. I feel really bad for Jerod Mayo. I think that he got set up to fail from the get-go there. I don't think you should fire him after this season, unless him winning that final game to make their draft pick worse was the final nail in his coffin. But what are your thoughts on Jerod getting fired after this, after one season being the hand-picked replacement for the great man himself?
I think it's obviously very harsh, given the fact that the reason Robert Kraft hired him was, they expected it to be a difficult 2024. Obviously, Harry Mayo, who had no coaching experience, but was a guy well respected throughout the Patriots organization. I can't say I'm surprised. I think as the season has gone on, I just don't see that the Mayo has been, is an effective fit for the Patriots head coach at this stage. And there obviously, I think, we've mentioned Vrabel. There's obviously a name on the market who is more attractive. But yeah, I think the way that the Patriots have conducted themselves over the last year, it feels like, obviously with Belichick leading, there is, not just a game and all from a coaching point of view, but I think, controlling relationships across the organization was obviously something that he was well known for. And I don't know. I don't think the Patriots is the Patriots. I think for me, even though they've got a fantastic quarterback and definitely have talent across the roster, is that appealing? I put them in the same bracket as the Jets. There is something culturally not sitting right with me at the moment with the Patriots, and I think this it's a very harsh sacking, I think, particularly given the reasons why they hired Mayo. And I don't think it's a click of the wrists, and the Patriots are going to be a playoff team again. They're going to have to endure some more heartache and another difficult season. I feel as early as it is this stage, difficult to say, but it's going to be a long road ahead back to the glory days, I think, for the Patriots, and that doesn't get solved in a season with a new head coach. So we'll see.
To be fair, they have had some bright spots this year. I think some of the play from Drake May has been really good. I think some of the defensive play has actually been quite solid this year. I'm quite a big fan of the Christian Gonzalez, I think the cornerback. I think he's been really good this year. So I think they've got some good young pieces. They just need to invest a hell of a lot more across the board. And it's where the draft becomes so crucial to teams like this trying to rebuild, because you can hit a bit of in free agency, but if you want to have those players long term for a phenomenal price, you need to get these guys in the draft and train them up. So it is going to be an interesting one. We're going to talk about the final head coach who came to London and got fired now, which is Doug Pederson. Well done, by the way, Kevin O'Connell, to be the only head coach to come to London this year and not get fired. Well done to him. So Doug Pederson, 3 years in Jacksonville, obviously Super Bowl winning head coach as well. And I'll be honest, it's one that hurt me to see get fired as an Eagles fan. And when he was in London, he was always really generous with his time as well, and generally a nice guy. So it was almost quite sad to see. Do you think it was the right move to move on from Doug at this stage?
Unfortunately, I think it probably was. I think because the murmurings have been there, probably since about week 5 of this year, we were very surprised. Was it before or after? I think we were surprised that he even made it to London in the first place. Look, it started so well for Doug Pederson, particularly after the turmoil of the Mayo administration. Yeah. So, I think the drop off in the Jaguars, particularly with, so many of us, including myself, saying that they were, a dark horse in the AFC for the last couple of years. Some going on to them saying, with Trevor Lawrence improving, they could have, a Super Bowl contending team. That certainly isn't the case. They've definitely got the talent around. I think this is, it's a really attractive job, the Jags. Yes. They've got, a lot of talent and, obviously now decent draft capital. But yeah, you're wasting another year of your core, really, and I think as well as I suppose the owner Khan was saying in his video today, he seemed like disappointed, I suppose, to be making that decision, and I think we were surprised that the GM didn't go as well. It's just not been a good couple of years for the Jags, particularly with so much expectations. But yeah, I think the Jags will go for someone very up and coming, offensive, potentially someone like Joe Brady or even Ben Johnson, as we've mentioned. I think the personnel and the players that they have suit that sort of style of head coach. So yeah, really interesting opening. But yeah, Doug Pederson, I'm not sure. Where does he go from here? Do you see him getting another head coaching job, or?
I think he's one of these people now, maybe doing media stuff. End of the day, you've got a Super Bowl on his resume, so if jobs come up, he'll always be potentially a candidate. But I can't see him being like, oh, we need to get Doug Pederson in. I think it'd be good for a team again with a young QB. I know obviously it hasn't quite worked with Trevor Lawrence, but I saw what he did with Carson Wentz. I really liked what he did with Carson Wentz, and I think that a team with a good young QB, if they had him in as a coach, I think he'd be great, because he's almost deemed to be like the QB whisperer, wasn't he? And just doesn't seem to have. Don't get me wrong, Trevor Lawrence has had his moments, he's had his flair, he has had his time where he has looked really, really good. Then there's just been other games where it just hasn't worked for the guy. And I would be interested to see if Doug does come back, but I personally think that it's going to be probably some media stuff now, at least for the next few years for Doug. Because, as much as I would love to see him back, because as I say, really good when you are really honest when he's on, when you ask him questions as well. He's not one of these who will shy away from the questions. But yeah, I was surprised he made it to the end of the season when the rumours were he was getting fired halfway through the London games. And I was at the press conference when they'd lost to the Bears, and the amount of questions he was getting, like, does Calm still back you? Do the players still back you? Like, it was Sky Sports were in the room at the time, and they were asking, like, they asked Trevor Lawrence whether the players were still playing for him.
Wow.
Which is not a question that you should be really hearing. And that was how many weeks ago? Was that week 6? Week 5, week 6?
Yeah.
Like, so it looked like it had been on the wall for a while. But at the same point, you do always feel sorry for someone that you actually quite like getting fired, unfortunately. There has been some news, though, that, to be fair, has been a bit surprising. For example, what's got in New York. I was quite pleased to see Daboll be kept for another year. But what are your thoughts on Joe Shane being kept on? The GM who's been quite famous for the Hard Knocks video sequence where he basically was saying that Barkley wouldn't go to the Eagles because they were priced out, and was basically convinced the owner to let Barkley walk. Are you surprised he's still got a job?
I think Joe Shane must have something on the ownership of the Giants, because it's not just the Barkley debacle, which obviously has made huge media noise and created a lot of I suppose negativity towards the Giants, but surely they've run out of patience. Albeit you look at the draft class that they've had this year, and it's been relatively good. They've obviously got Davis and Tyron Tracy. The last couple of classes, and obviously what they've done with Daniel Jones, I don't understand. There's people who such as Joe Douglas, who I think have got sacked for way less than what Joe Shane has, what he's built at the Giants. I think, for me, I was expecting this to be a complete overhaul in terms of you completely start again. I think there's been too much. When was the last time that obviously they had the winning season in that I'd say anomaly first year of Daboll, which I think is he's still surviving because of that season.
He was fit all year as well.
Exactly, yeah. That was his coach of the year year. But when have the Giants been consistently good? It must be at least over a decade now since they've had back-to-back winning seasons. And I obviously it starts with the roster building. They don't have enough good players, in my opinion. It starts with the quarterback. I was probably one of those who said, Daniel Jones had a good enough year to merit him getting, keeping the job for the next year. But the amount of money that they threw it in and then have now wasted, I think there've got to be, repercussions for that. So yeah, Joe Shane for me, I think is someone who I definitely expect to be let go. There's again, I think bad organisations make bad decisions, and it just seems like a little bit of a dumpster fire for the Giants, because we talk about this QB class as well being only 2 quarterbacks. They've obviously worked their way out of contention there, unless they give up a lot to trade up. So what do they do at quarterback in the new year? It's difficult to see the Giants making huge improvement at this stage. They've obviously got great players, but decent players, and not enough of them, and no one throwing to them unless you bring Drew Lock back. But I can't see that happening. So yeah, Joe Shane, he is. How on earth is he still got a job? But we'll pick up this conversation this time next year, maybe.
Yeah, and obviously speaking of NFC East teams that make strange decisions all the time, we'll now talk about the Cowboys. What are they going to do about McCarthy? Is he staying? Is he going? What are they going to do? Because at the end of the day, that team has 2 players taking up majority of their salary cap, and they're still going to pay one more in Micah Parsons in the very near future. What is going to happen over there?
A really strange one, seeing the statement from Jerry Jones regarding, the Bears requesting to speak to Mike McCarthy. Obviously, he's, he has contract uncertainty. He's out of contract in the next couple of weeks. So, once that happens, I suppose he's, free to talk to whoever he wants. But, Jerry Jones in the last couple of weeks, it's felt like McCarthy has been edging towards safe in Dallas, but now seems to be throwing him under the bus in terms of saying, well, if they want to speak to him, so be it. We don't care. There's obviously, I think, a relationship issue between, that's obvious, I suppose, over the last couple of years. McCarthy has been criticised. We thought he was going to be sacked last year after that dismal playoff defeat to the Packers. And now after an obviously even worse season, finishing outside the playoffs with a poor record. I don't know how he's still there, but I can also see the logic in being, I think Mike McCarthy's a decent head coach. He's obviously got that Super Bowl winning resume, but I don't know. The Cowboys have been stuck, I think, in this little cycle for so long. I think they should move on. I do still think the Cowboys have good players. Again, I thought they should move on from Dak, but that's obviously not going to be the case next year. So I don't know. I think Mike McCarthy secretly wants out as well, and I think the Bears, I suppose this sort of smokescreen that has been thrown, I think will only add. I think murmurings and discontent within the Cowboys organization. So I think Mike McCarthy would probably be doing himself a favour if he looks elsewhere. But again, he's going from one disorganized franchise to another if he takes on the Bears job. So so be it for him. But I'm 50-50 on whether he'll be the Cowboys head coach the start of next year. Probably leaning towards he won't be.
Well, you know what happens when you have a bad breakup, you often end up rebounding into a worse one. So maybe that's what he's about to do. So we've obviously mentioned there the Bears job. We've also got the Saints job. We've got the Jets. We've got Jags, Patriots, and potentially Cowboys. Out of those jobs, which would you say is the most appealing to you if you were on the market as the head coach, a potential head coach candidate?
I think on paper, the potential for the Chicago Bears with Caleb Williams, a fairly stacked roster and, a decent draft capital next year, I've just mentioned that they obviously, a franchise that has struggled in recent years, but I do see the potential, that's, I think, the highest ceiling job at present, with the personnel there, the players that they have. Again, I even think that the Jags as well, I think, is a good job to take on because I don't think there's too much media scrutiny on the Jags, not too much pressure. Obviously, with the quarterback they have, there's obviously going to be expectations, but I think there's a lot to work with Jacksonville. So I think those two are, for an offensive candidate like Ben Johnson, who he's been obviously picked up as the number one candidate, I think, across the market. He'll be licking at his lips, I think, being able to work with Caleb Williams or Trevor Lawrence and the players around them. Obviously Brian Thomas has had an incredible year. What he's done with the Jaguars, and other offensive weapons that the Jags have. Tank Bigsby's sort of emerging with Travis Etienne, I suppose, looking a little bit like he's done and dusted. And same with the Bears, obviously. They've got DJ Moore, Dunze, starting out his career was okay. Keenan Allen coming towards the end of his, but we know what he can do, and a sort of plethora of running backs and draft capital to work with. So, I think they are probably the two most exciting. On the opposite side, which am I least excited about? I think possibly the Patriots and the Saints, to be honest. Probably the Saints, purely because they don't have that quarterback. I like the Saints as an organisation in terms of, I think they've got nice kits, and they've always had, good players around the trenches, but what on earth has gone wrong for the Saints this year? They need
Aren't
to,
they struggling cap wise as well? Aren't they
they
well
are
over their
massively
cap at the
struggling
moment?
cap-wise.
Which
Yeah, exactly.
which means that's even more of a problem, because
Even
if they're
more,
not even able
more
to,
of yeah.
and obviously it's a city that, again, a city they've always wanted to, and to be fair, fortunate enough, going to be going there in February. The franchise tag will be over in New Orleans for the Super Bowl this year, which is great news for all of us involved. But so obviously we're not going to say too much negativity about the Saints, because we like the city. But yeah, so Saints, would you not consider the Jets in that tougher job mold, or is the Jets blinkers preventing you from saying that they potentially, particularly with you don't know what's going on QB wise there either? And if you do retain a QB, you'll lose probably your best wide receiver. Is that not a slight dumpster fire situation?
Yeah, I certainly think the Jets is a complete dumpster fire with what has been left over. It's obviously all down to what happens to Aaron Rodgers. Let's assume that he won't be there. I think obviously Devontae Adams won't be there either, and probably a few other players who've been with are only really there at the Jets because of Rodgers, players like Alan Lazard. But I think that there is a core at the Jets, and we obviously Quinnen Williams, Jermaine Johnson, who's been injured, Quincy Williams, Sauce Gardner. They've all had down years, probably except Quinnen Williams, but their down years are still decent. I think Sauce Gardner. There's been so much noise about Sauce Gardner having a huge regression, but if you look at his play, he's still a very, very good cornerback. It's just been an awful year for the Jets organization. I think they have such a solid core, just without a quarterback. If they can, I really don't know what the Jets do in terms of assuming that Rodgers won't be there. Are they in a position to draft a quarterback? We're not we're not hearing great things about the quarterbacks outside of the likes of Cam Ward and Shador. So are you taking a huge risk there? Do you go after someone else? Is it going risking going after someone like Kirk Cousins, or is that just going to completely repeat the cycle? I think the quarterback situation in the Jets is just such a minefield that a neutral coach would probably lean towards. Oh no, I'm staying well away from that, but I see so much potential for the Jets. I think it's an exciting job, probably not the best, as I've sort of said, but yeah, I just for my own sanity, just hope we can work it out and we can get at least a few more wins next year. I'm not going to push the boat and say we're a playoff team in a couple of years. I just want to see decent, competent football. That's all I care about.
And if only you were able to pick up, say, a good free agent like quarterback, like a Sam Darnold, a player like that, who'd a QB that's done all right this year. That'd be a shame, wouldn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I love Sam. I mean, he was awesome in London and gave a great interview, and we see how well he is liked in Minnesota. You can't move on from Sam. I don't think Minnesota. He'll be their starting quarterback next year, whatever happens.
It must be painful though, as a Jets fan, to see that quarterback that you've obviously had in your building at some point, and it just seems to be like a cultural problem of being able to develop a quarterback.
Oh, 100%. I think
saw them. So after how many young QBs have you had in that have just gone no?
Yeah, when Sam was traded, and obviously we were going to take Zach Wilson, I was very hesitant because this sounds really bad, but the stature of Zach Wilson compared to Sam Darnold in terms of we know how much height in the NFL of the quarterback makes such a difference in terms of the general quarter, the field general, sorry, of what Sam Darnold has now become compared to a gunslinger and very unpredictable like of Zach Wilson. But we failed both players because we weren't able to develop them. Have we failed Aaron Rodgers, or has he failed the Jets? I'm not sure. I think it's probably a combination of the two, to be honest, because the Jets organization has hugely contributed to his downfall. But yeah, if you're a decent quarterback in the league, you don't want to be anywhere near the Jets, do you, at this stage?
Understandable. So we're now going to move on to talk about the playoff picture, because obviously your former quarterback, Sam Darnold's head in there with the Vikings. But let's start off with the first game that we're going to get. We get the Texans, who I feel have kind of limped their way into the playoffs, versus the Chargers team that I don't think you ever quite know what you're going to get out of them. What are your thoughts on that opening matchup? It seems an interesting one, that.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a very close matchup. I think based on essentially what you've just said, the Texans, their offense has not been clicking at all in recent weeks and throughout the season. They've only managed to score, I think, 25, 30 points plus twice all year. And when you consider, the expectations before this season with, the acquisitions that they made, I think we would have assumed, the Texans to be a huge Super Bowl contender. But, CJ Stroud has regressed a little. They've had big injuries. And they haven't been able to put up the numbers that we have been expecting. Whereas the Chargers, I feel we were probably undervaluing them at the start of the season. Obviously, they've made a huge head coaching acquisition in Jim Harbaugh. Obviously, so much noise about how culturally he can change an organization, and we've seen that. We've not necessarily seen, the explosiveness, and Chargers teams don't blow away other teams. They haven't, beaten a top team yet this year. But I think that makes for two very evenly matched teams. And, purely because, I think they've played better in the last couple of weeks. The Chargers, they're coming off a good win against an albeit poor Raiders team. A lot of confidence, particularly in the receivers of Quinton Johnson having a great day, and Lambert Conkey being a stud acquisition. I think they can cause problems for the Texans. I think they are more of the safer bet if we were to pick between the two at this stage, because I think the Texans have just been regressing on offense, and we know how Chargers can suffocate teams in their play. So fairly evenly matched. I think it'll be a very close game, but I'm going to go Chargers to wedge it.
See, I'm thinking Chargers as well. I just think that the Texans this year benefited from being in the same division as the Jaguars, the Colts, and the Titans this year. I think that is if they were in any other division this year, they wouldn't be in the playoffs because of, I think, how they played. And obviously, when you play those teams twice a season, it doesn't half inflate your win column up. I still think CJ Stroud is a phenomenal quarterback, and I think he's going to be a phenomenal quarterback in this league. I think obviously some of the injuries they've had hasn't helped, like losing Tank Dell, how they did again, was just horrific for them. But I just think that the Chargers will just be too strong for them on the day on that one. We now move on to the clash. A familiar clash, to be fair, between the Ravens and the Steelers. Now, in the regular season, this one often can lead to a Steelers win. Are we seeing that, or have the Steelers kind of hit pumpkin mode at this point in their season?
The Steelers remind me very much of their season, was it 3 or 4 years ago, where they won, I think, 11 games straight, lost 4 to end the regular season, sort of crawled in, and then one and done, got absolutely dump-fired in the wild card round. And this sort of feels like the same. I think the wheels have started to come off for the Steelers in recent weeks. Not as explosive on offense, and defensively their best players haven't been at the races, I suppose. It was obviously a dead rubber in the end between them and the Bengals at the weekend, a very scrappy game. I don't know. I think the Russell Wilson move is starting to look a little bit concerning, given his play over the last month. I wouldn't be surprised at all if we see, some of Justin Fields here to sort of spice it up a bit. I think that's the only way that the Steelers can really trouble if we're going off recent play, that the Steelers can trouble the Ravens, because I think in every facet of the matchup, Baltimore, I think, wins hands down. They've got a better quarterback, better running back, better receivers. George Pickens has been nowhere in the last couple of weeks, and Dave Flowers and Bateman, he's obviously picked up an injury, but we expect him to play. And on defense as well. I think we know these divisional games or divisional matchup games in the playoffs can be close, but I think if Baltimore gets into an early lead and I say 10-14-0 up within the first quarter, I think the Steelers could get really blown up here. So I'm going to go for the Ravens by at least one score. Mainly given maybe recency bias, but I just think they're the much better team.
I think when you look at the Ravens defense on the second half of the season, obviously when Hamilton came back, they did not improve defensively, which was probably their weakness early on in the season. So by fixing that as well, it also meant that they were an all-round better team, whereas I think that the Steelers rely on a grindy one score, maybe a field, because you look how many games in the early of the season the Steelers won without actually scoring touchdowns. Wasn't it 2 games they won early in the season with just field goals? So they need that kind of game. And the problem you've got is if we get MVP candidate Lamar version of Lamar Jackson, you're not going to win a game like that.
No.
And I think the difference between them this year and previous years is Lamar doesn't necessarily have to be Superman because he's not back there alone. He's got a huge, heavy battering around. He can just go, here, you run it for a bit. And then you look at as well, you look at that whole line is big. Then you've got Ricard blocking for them as well, who's also a big, meaty guy as well. So you're talking like that's a big unit just running down. And I think that's where they have the big advantage, I think, on this one. So finish off the NFC now, move on to a game that for a team that probably wasn't expected to be in the playoffs this year, and the Bills as well. So between the Broncos and the Bills this year, Broncos, I think, surprised a few people by even being here. How are we seeing that one going? Because I'd be honest with you, I can't see this one being close.
See, I think this is probably the best game of the weekend, in all honesty. I think, obviously the Broncos have been one of the surprise stories of the season with, Sean Payton and Bo Nix engineering what has been an unbelievable season. I do think that the Broncos defense, they're fantastic against the D. They've got individual players who can make superstar moves. They're obviously coming up against the juggernaut team of the probably the NFL, to be honest. With Josh Allen, they're going to have to be exceptional to stop this offense. But I don't know. Something has changed, I think, with the perception of Bo Nix. Obviously they blew out the Chiefs. They're obviously playing a B team, but there were starters playing, particularly on defense on that side, and they were just absolutely all over them. So they're coming into this game with coming off a really good performance. I'm purely thinking momentum-wise here. With obviously the Bills didn't play many of their starters against the Patriots, but obviously lost. Is potentially a bit of rustiness. I think that's probably the only way that the Broncos are going to win this game. But I do think they have, a bit of the chance. I think Sean Payton, he's a tactician and he can work, I suppose, something around here. But the Bills, for me, I think are probably my favourites in the AFC. They've had, it's been Josh Allen's, I think, best year. Whether or not he wins MVP, I think he's had the probably the best highlight reel of any player this year so far. They don't have a true alpha receiver, but I don't think they need one for the way they play. So yeah, I think they should be able to navigate their way around the Broncos, given the personnel that they have. I'm just not sure it's going to be the script that we're all expecting. I think this one could get a little bit scrappy at points. But yeah, the Bills, I think, are the team. I'm going to say within one score. I think the Broncos can test the Bills, particularly if they get an early possession and take the lead. I think there'd be a few nervous faces around Buffalo on Sunday.
So what else has been quite interesting this year, seeing the resurgence of Courtland Sutton this year. Seeing a wide receiver that I don't think people thought that was probably at his window of being an elite. So the potential was there for him. Everyone's always going. He was always, again, fantasy. He was always a player that people drafted normally quite early. And the last few years, we're starting to see that, obviously, with the Russell Wilson play at quarterback and all the rest of it. I think that it's been really good to see his resurgence this year and how good he has been. I do think if they have got a chance against the Bills, he's going to be crucial. Making some of those big plays, I think they need to be in this game. The one thing I will say is about that team with the likes of Bo Nix and Courtland Sutton and some of the other wide receivers, they do have some big play ability there. So I think that will be crucial. But I do think the Bills are going to win this by a couple, just because I just think that they are too strong. They're the only team that's beat the Chiefs this year, and they're the only team, I think, in the AFC that can beat the Chiefs this year. I think there's some in the NFC that can beat the Chiefs, but anyway, we'll move on to those now. So we're going to move over to I wonder which team this will be. So we're going to talk about the Brazil game, Eagles versus Packers, the rematch from Brazil. Big game, that one. It's 9:30 our time to watch it. So a good time window for us on the Sunday. So what are your thoughts going into this one? Because for me, I always feel the Packers are more or less a B-Tech version of the Eagles. They're not quite a full qualification. They're just a B-Tech version. They're slightly worse at everything.
I think it's a tough matchup for the Eagles. I think, I do remember actually watching that game, and the plays. I remember seeing. I think Zach Bourne. That was his first game as an Eagle, and we see how absolutely unreal he's been. He was my dark horse for defensive player of the year. I don't think he's going to get it, but he's been phenomenal. And I think the way they can find players like Bourne and Mekhi Becton, obviously former Jet, but has been stood now for as a starting offensive lineman, which is great to see. I think the Eagles have, when you compare it to the start of the season, certainly from a neutral point of view, they are in such a better place. There's a better it feels around the organisation when the fan base, and they're well rested, obviously. Having rested Saquon and Jalen, who hasn't played for a few weeks. Could that be something that comes in the water? I don't know, but yeah, the Packers are dealing with a few injuries. They've obviously lost Christian Watson. That's a huge explosive play ability, and I think that's a big thing that you need in these games, really, particularly when the Eagles defense has been so stellar throughout the year. I think they've only conceded 300 yards on offense 3 times, I think, this year, maybe 4 times. So it's going to be really, really difficult. They're going to have to run the ball well with the Packers, and I think Jordan Love is going to have to show his absolute best. And I don't think we've seen that for a few weeks. If we're being honest, they obviously lost against the Bears. They did have starters playing. They were probably trying to win that game. I don't know. Is there going to be a little hangover over that? I think this is an Eagles victory. How close are we talking? I don't know. I think the Eagles can win by a score. They should be able to, in my opinion. I don't know. Can you see any concerns from your side? Are there any concerns over an upset?
I think from my point of view, the only way we lose this game is if we defeat ourselves, which we are capable of doing that. We've proven many times that if we want to lose, we will find a way, whether it be penalties, whether it be stupid play calling. If the Eagles want to find a way to lose a game, they are probably the best in the league at finding a way to lose, the best. I think the difference is between these two teams is the Eagles is slightly better at everything than what the Packers are. Like, they've got a really good run game. Ours is better. Their O-line's fairly good. Ours is better. They've got some good wide receivers. Ours is better. Like, maybe the only position they may be better than us is maybe slightly better in Jordan Love, maybe slightly better than Jalen Hurts. But I think if you've seen the heights of both of these players, I think Jalen Hurts' heights have been much, much higher than Jordan Love. I think also as well the other difference is Jordan Love has a tendency to suddenly go, I'm going to throw an interception here. And when the Eagles' defense has become quite ball hawky in recent weeks, particularly Garner Johnson, who has had a hell of a second half of the season, I think that I don't have any fear of us losing this game unless we implode. And if we implode, I think we are then looking for a head coach, because that's the only way we lose this game. So we will move on now from my double-digit Eagles win that I'm predicting to probably, I think, the game that I'm most looking forward to out of all of them. The Buccaneers versus the Commanders, I think, is a true coin flip. I think both of these teams on their day are amazing, but off their day, they are both horrific. So I think this is a true coin flip, this one. So what are your thoughts going into this one?
And exactly the same phrase written down. Yeah, flip of the coin. I think you could go either way on this one. I'm gonna lean towards the Commanders purely because of Jaden Daniels, and I think the Bengals. The Buccaneers tendency, I think, on defense to be slightly soft in the perimeters, and we know when Jaden can get going, how well he's been able to let loose this year, both as a runner as a passer. Obviously, the Buccaneers beat the Commanders to start the year, so they have their number technically on the bragging rights, I suppose, coming into this game. But the Commanders have won their last 3 games to close the season. They obviously had to rely on Marcus Mariota against the Cowboys to get them into this game, and Baker Mayfield is obviously playing really, really good. He's throwing touchdowns for fun, and these are 2 quarterbacks who have certainly gone over expectations for this year, and I think there's definite trust from personnel across the franchises for their quarterbacks. So yeah, I think this could be a real shootout to defenses that aren't considered among the elites. So that paves the way for good attacking football. So score for score. So I'm thinking this could be high scoring. High scoring. Commanders edge it by a field goal perhaps. But yeah, a serious coin flip game. And it could go down to the last touch of the game.
This game for me, I think, comes down to one matchup. I think it's Evans versus Lattimore. I think whoever wins that matchup wins the game. I think Mike Evans is on his day unstoppable as a wide receiver. Since Lattimore in recent weeks has proven that he has been good since he's been there. He did well against the Eagles, I think. So for me, that's where it comes down. I think Bake Show's going to be Bake Show. I think he's just had a phenomenal year. Another quarterback that a team gave up on, going on to having a good career. We've seen it with Geno Smith, we've seen it with Mayfield, and now obviously we've got Sam Darnold. It's always nice to see these quarterbacks that more or less been abandoned by their organization go on to have these good games. I do think it's a coin flip. You do wonder whether being at home, whether that makes a difference. The pressure being on the Commanders now is something they haven't really experienced all season, because we're now in playoff football. I think that maybe a year earlier, maybe even 2 years earlier than they initially thought, but they are looking amazing long term. And for the NFC East, it's going to be interesting moving forward how the Eagles, and maybe if the other teams decide they're going to rebuild. We'll move on to the final game. And again, I think it's a good matchup, this one. We've got the Rams versus the Vikings. The Vikings, who have got the tied second best record in the NFC, going away from home. It just doesn't feel right, does it? But they're going away. They're going to LA. How are we seeing that game going? Because I think this one could be an explosive game.
Yeah, I think the fact that it's in LA could have a huge factor. The travel time. Obviously they have time, but the actual time to adjust isn't. It basically going from one week to another. It's not yet no special treatment for this. And the Vikings obviously have come off a difficult defeat against the Lions. So I think if we're talking about outside sort of factors, then I think the Rams are probably in the best place. They didn't really have anything to play for. Obviously, a bit more of a seeding, but they had home field advantage coming into the playoffs, and Jimmy G played well. The other players, had good games, in a sense, against the Seahawks. And I think that's my main worry is that the Rams, as much as a great coach, I think Kevin O'Connell has been. I just feel Sean McVay knows him and will be able to work him out at some point in the game. That's my big worry, because I do have the Vikings as a real contender, and if they can get past the Rams, I think they can beat anyone, including the Lions. Despite that the defeat at the weekend, it was a close game. Obviously, turning its head in the second half, but I think this is a real obstacle that I'm leaning towards LA. Being able to pull off probably a big upset, to be honest. Given the matchups on paper, they have their number from early in the season, and we know how good Matthew Stafford is against a blitz-heavy defense. He's been doing it, for so long, and we know that's obviously Brian Flores' big weapon. I just feel that the ability of and the experience of Los Angeles, plays into huge consideration here, which I don't want to say that the Vikings will lose, because I've got a bit of a future on them, but I think that the Rams are probably the team I would pick going into this weekend. Very, very close game.
It's a tough one, though. It's a tough one to pick between, though. It's one of those where, because again, I like both head coaches. I think both head coaches are amongst the best we've got in the league. And Kevin O'Connell again was so cool when he came over to the UK as well. He was so relaxed, so calm, and so generous again with his time when he was over here. I think it's a tough one. I would like to see the Vikings do it, just because, again, they're an organisation that I think kind of needs it. They're another one of those teams that have always been there, but never been there. So I think it'd be interesting to see. I do think I would like to see the Vikings win it, not just because I think it'd be an easier matchup for the Eagles moving forward, because we would obviously get the winner of the Buccaneers Commanders game, and no, we wouldn't. Actually, no, we'd get them. We'd get the Vikings. If we actually let's go for Rams then. But yeah, I think that it's going to be an interesting one either way. I do think that it's going to be a battle of coaches. It's going to be a battle of quarterbacks, and it's what you want to see in the NFL. So not going to complain either way. But interesting weekend we've got in front of us. Obviously, thank you everyone again for listening. Thank you, Johnny, for your time today, as always, and enjoy the games this weekend. And we'll be back next week with another special episode.